Hey guys, this is Adam Carswell, and welcome back to another rockstar episode of Dream Chasers Interviews with the Future. We're joined today by a rock star. Some may actually call him an icon, which he has a really cool acronym for the word icon. We're joined today by Logan Freeman, co-founder of FTW Investments. And Logan has been on Dream Chasers way back in the day. It would actually be really interesting now that I think about it to go listen to your interview there compared to where you're at now, man, because you are the definition of exponential growth based on what I know and have observed. So, Logan, we're stoked to have you back here and ready to dive into a lot of what we just highlighted in the green room. So, welcome back.
I'm happy to be here, Adam. It's been fun just building our relationship together, both growing. You're changing and growing and moving a lot, and it's just been a blast because for me, like we mentioned in the green room, I just said it feels like I'm in a way different place 15 months ago. And you were like, well, 15 months ago, before that 15 months, it was in a different place. And we've been able to share that journey together, which has been pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And sharing the journey together. I remember it was around the time when I first moved to Canada. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Logan just mentioned this is our first interview from Calgary, Alberta. My wife and I just moved here. And I remember I was at a coffee shop in Newfoundland having a phone call with you about the Cash Flow Connections mentorship program. Yeah. And guys, I really wanted to win Logan's business because, if you don't know who he is, you're going to get to know him, because Logan Freeman, you want to have him in your circles if you can. And he's like, I just don't know if this is what I'm looking for right now. Went back to the drawing board, and Hunter and I have made this pretty clear. And for those who aren't familiar with Raise Masters, our mastermind, you go to raisemasters.com. But when we went to the drawing board building out this group, we were like, we need an avatar. We need a dream client, a dream customer, who's someone that we could build this mastermind around. And I think we shared this with you later, Logan, but we're like, we need to build this for a Logan Freeman. He's going to be our LeBron James, or maybe now, I don't know who the star of the NBA would be now that LeBron's kind of starting to lose, but we need our poster child. So that was the direction we went. And that's a nice hack, by the way, out there for anyone who's building a business. Instead of, identifying maybe I've heard the fake dream client where you make a guy named Bob and you give him all these characteristics. Just pick the one person that you want as a dream client and build around that. Yeah. So we got the Raise Masters poster child here today, guys, Logan Freeman. And that's a little bit of context of how we got to know each other. And I'm sure we're going to go deeper on the stories here in a moment.
Absolutely, man. I remember that conversation to this day. And, I don't know how many months afterwards, it was like, I talked to Hunter and he's like, look, I've got something in the works here. It's going to be just for you. And I'm pretty sure I was either number one or two that signed up for that exact program. And the growth of that has just been unbelievable. So obviously you guys have been doing a great job, and, it's been very valuable for our business.
Totally. So, Logan, you have a background in football, and the NFL is a very distinctive part of your story. There was a lot about your story that I got to learn in Austin when you spoke to our group. And I guess before we get into some of the stuff that we talked about before we got started, could you briefly share your story, touch on football? If you could give us the 2-minute version of the icon speech, just so our members or our viewers and listeners can understand what an icon is, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. So grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri. It's the capital of Missouri, little town, and great place to grow up. It really was. And a few things really happened to me in my childhood. My father struggled with drugs and alcohol his whole life, and my mom, really picked up the slack. And so it was kind of two things. One, the value of a dollar. We came from lower middle class and just really needed to work for every dollar. So that kind of, is a thread in my career now. And then the second part was, really understanding that, family is extremely important, and relationships are everything. And, these two things, I think, really helped me kind of in my trajectory in my career, because I am the relationship guy now, and I think I saw a LinkedIn post from a guy that I really respect. He said, if you think relationships are valuable, they're more valuable than you think. And relationships do two things. They bring opportunities, which is great, but they also, maybe more importantly, solve problems. And, in the business that we are in, we are really in the business of solving problems for people, adding value. Well, how do you add value? You do things that other people aren't willing to do or cannot do because they're not willing to solve different problems. And so, growing up, I really identified as an athlete. I found refuge in athletics. It was kind of an outlet for me to say, okay, I could put all my energy. I really struggled with kind of, ADD and obsessive compulsive disorder when I was growing up. And so I had something to really kind of pour my energy in. And
which a lot of the times those make the best CEOs, those with that designation.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
sure.
it's a really big drive, right? And if you can direct that in the right way, it's extremely powerful. And so, I graduated high school as a football player, got a scholarship, thought I was going to go play D1 ball, and I did not. I went to a Division II school because I wanted to play. I didn't really want to sit on the sidelines, and I wanted the opportunity to really grow as an athlete. And so I went and played Division II ball and got a medical redshirt my first year because I actually played in some games. But then I got hurt. And so I was able to come back for that fifth year. That fifth year is really what helped me develop as an athlete and as a young man to be able to get drafted or picked up as an undrafted free agent in the NFL. And, the NFL did not work out for me. Frankly, to be transparent, I wanted to make a practice squad. I think the salary for a practice squad guy was like $400,000 at the time. I'm sure it's more now. I don't know, but that was more money than I thought that was all the money in the world. Right. And so I was like, I just want to put that away, and go invest it. So, that was a big theme for me, but I ended up getting cut. And when I got cut, it was like, this decision point in my life, but it also was like a relief. Like I just didn't want to be an athlete anymore. I felt like I was kind of pigeonholing myself. And all I had ever really done was athletics. And so I was like, man, there's got to be more to me, and I wanted to find out what that was. And so that really started. So I decided, hey, I'm done. I'm done with football. 49ers called, 3 weeks after I got cut. I told them no, and I went back to school to finish my master's degree. And here's really where my life changed. So, no longer having a scholarship, I needed a job. You didn't make money if you weren't a drafted guy and you didn't make the cuts and all this stuff. So I didn't have any money. And so I had to get a job making 265 cold calls a day. And, I had to drive an hour both ways to this job. And so turned the car to the classroom on wheels, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Lewis Howes, John Lee Dumas, Robert Kiyosaki, all of the guys just pouring into me. And I'm sitting here going to a formal education at night. I'm having kind of an impractical, education during the day, and I'm making 265 cold calls per day.
I have to ask, when you were listening to those thought leaders you just mentioned, who, by the way, if our listeners aren't familiar with any of those names, just go look up one. They're all incredible. But I'm wondering, at this era, were you listening to them on like CD, on tape? Was
CDs,
it on?
man.
Okay.
CDs. I was buying the CDs, finding them at old bookstores, and I'd have these massive CDs. Unfortunately, later when I moved to Kansas City, somebody broke into my car and stole all my CDs. I was like, really? Like,
hopefully that changes their life, right?
I hope it did, man, because it really did for me. And, so back to those cold calls, man, I was getting told no 264 times a day, but I was doing the work, and I outsold the rest of the sales team. And they had one product that was like the big breadwinner. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go sell all these little, lists, because it was just lists of data I was selling to vendors. But they had this new product that if you sold it, the commission was much higher. So I just focused my efforts on that and trying to create the value there. And so ended up, doing that for about 6 months, graduated with my master's degree, lost 120 pounds in 6 months. So my agenda for each day was wake up at 3:30, go to the gym, eat breakfast, get on the road, listen to my podcast. What's that?
This was when?
This was 8 years ago while I was doing my.
I know you recently lost like a decent amount of weight as well.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that story here shortly too. So I wake up at 3:30, go to the gym, go get in the car, drive to work, do the work, go back to school for 4 hours at night, and spend 12 hours in the library every single Saturday to just get caught up. And so, I was doing statistics, I was doing, regression analysis, all these things that weren't really, things that I use necessarily today because I have, Excel models to do most of these things. But at the end of the day, man, the biggest thing that happened was a physical change, right, with all the weight loss, but then also a mental change when I was in the car listening to all of those different guys. And one thing that really helped me was I saw all of these things, or I learned all of these things through the tapes and through the podcasts that I was listening to. But I had a couple mentors in my life that were doing these things in practicality. So I saw them at work. And so I was like, man, and these guys were 30, 40 years ahead of me. And I'm like, okay, I'm reading all the books, I'm listening to all the tapes, but then I see it in real life. But big thing that happened. So graduate, my dad comes up to help me move out of my cockroach infested apartment. No front door on the apartment complex. Now that I own apartments, I'm like, come on,
Were
man.
you and your dad on good terms at this point?
We were, yeah, we were
Nice.
on good terms. I had come to a kind of a forgiveness path with my dad, and just kind of realized that, maybe he's not necessarily the father figure, but he's still my dad, and so, he was a 6'3", 250-pound strapping Native American, dunk a basketball, hit a golf ball 300 yards, and he couldn't walk up the stairs, man. And so I knew something was wrong. Well, less than 3 weeks later, my dad passed away with complications from, a stroke, and then from his liver cirrhosis and all these things. So it was really quick. And so if you could think about a young man, 24 years old, no longer an athlete, going through this big personal change, trying to start his new job in Kansas City, and then boom, graduated and lost his dad. It was just like this really big decision point in my life. And I dove really back down into my faith, which was really important for me. And then I had these mentors on tape, but in real life as well, that said, hey, you got a decision to make right now, and you can go one of two paths, and so I decided to try to go down the path of that was less traveled, which is, of accountability, which is of discipline and focus and achievement, and trying to build real world skills that were valuable. And so moved to Kansas City, and was a franchise consultant with Jimmy John's, and was the youngest one that they had ever hired. So I had 22 stores across the Midwest. So Arkansas, Iowa, and Kansas City. And, hit a glass ceiling really early. And I was just like, look, man, I think that, I asked my boss, I was like, what's the next move for me? He's like, well,
actually, I'm curious, what is a franchise consultant for Jimmy John's? What does a day in the life of that look like?
If you ever go into a Jimmy John's, they all look the same. They all have the same signage. They're all clean. The bathrooms are clean.
Very clean.
They're typically pretty freaky fast. And so my job was to go make sure all the franchisees were upholding all of those standards. And so I would grade all of those franchisees, and the GMs and the different managers were actually bonused off of the grades that they got from the corporate office from me. So that was my kind of job. And he's like, look, you're the youngest guy. You got to put your time in. 2 weeks later, I was out of there. And I started with a startup company here in Kansas City that had 3 guys, in the whole company. And so just picking up the phones once again and making 200 cold calls a day, and launched some really great pilot programs with Western Express and Swift and JB Hunt. So it was in the transportation space, but I was there for 2.5, 3 years. I really grew as a professional, and I met my wife, met the best man in my wedding. But I wanted to take the next step in my progression. And so I went to a larger company with a larger salary. And 15 months later, after being at that company, I was fired. And this is about 5.5 years ago now. And I said, okay, I think I'm unemployable. I really do. Like I've read all the books. I have done all the work, and I'm not able to use it in my job, and I'm being capped on what I can actually do. And so I was like, I don't like that. And so by happenstance, one of the buddies that had been selling me some single family homes here in Kansas City said, hey, my head of acquisitions just left. I just landed a $50 million fund. I need somebody to step in right now. And so I stepped in the real estate space as a vendor to a fund, and was able to do over 150, 200 transactions for this fund. And I sat down with the fund after doing a huge refinance and returning a bunch of capital to the investors. And I said, where'd the money come from? And they were like, Logan, it was a syndication. I was like, what is that word? And so I went on another educational journey, read all the books, went to all the different meetups and groups and seminars, and said, okay, this is what I want to do. And so I started brokering, commercial properties, multifamily properties, and started to buy a couple properties myself. Quickly found out that I ran out of experience and money really quickly. And so I said, okay, I think it's time to find some partners that I can build a business around to create this syndication business in this private equity space. And that's when I found Parker and Corey, the TMW of FTW. And we launched FTW in late 2019 is when we started, buying our first properties. And then everybody knows what happened in March of 2020, COVID. And we were talking about this in the green screen, but if you check and you track Green Street's property price index, which tracks not just multifamily, it's all commercial properties, different asset types. In April of 2020, all the way till September of 2020, there was a massive decline in property values. And then all of a sudden, all of the hockey stick growth, right? And, you can think about it from this standpoint, right? Lenders opened back up. We had, a vaccine, I think at that point, or at least some sort of vaccine. This was before all the different waves that came, but prices started to go up. Now they've normalized, but they've normalized at a really high level compared to pre-pandemic levels. And so in that period of time, we bought 1,000 multifamily units, an office building, and now we've been growing and scaling the company. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Wow. We need to also start looking into what we can do to do the Logan Freeman biography or the movie, whatever it may be, because I think each little section that you walk us through there, I mean, there's stories buried amongst it all, but thank
Absolutely.
you for going into detail there. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you feel like you know this guy a little bit now. So taking it up to speed where we're at now, you have, as I mentioned, also slimmed down a lot recently.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's been a shift in the growth of FTW, which we're going to talk about that here too. But I think you've had another mindset shift just within the past year or two that's very evident as well.
Yeah, I would say this, I started having, babies. I've got 2 kids now and growing a business and COVID and all these things. I wasn't necessarily watching, what I was putting into my body, and I wasn't treating my body like a temple that it is. And so, I made a big pact to myself and to my wife after going to the doctor for the first time last May, I think, or June or July, I can't remember, but it was last summer. And he's like, man, you weigh 287 pounds. And I'm like, dude, I played left tackle in Division II football at the highest level at 287 pounds. I'm not playing football anymore. So I was like, something needs to happen. And so I said, okay, how can I apply Atomic Habits, James Clear's book, to my health? So I started to break it down, right? And honestly, I mean, the weight loss industry is a crazy sham in my opinion. It's math. I broke it down to math. Okay. What am I putting in my body? How many calories am I, burning per day? And what does my body react well to? I do terrible with gluten. Absolutely terrible. It makes me feel tired, makes my stomach hurt. I love bread. I love carbs, just like everybody. Don't get me wrong. But I had to start doing these things. So I broke it down. I said, okay, every 2 months, I'm going to have a new habit. Okay. So the first one was, let's just start tracking my food. The second one, let me start working out again. Okay, what do I like to do? Well, what's the biggest bang for my buck? Kettlebells and rowing for me. So I love doing those 2 things. So I got a kettlebell, started a kettlebell club, and I started rowing again. Then after that, I started stacking on my steps. Okay, so now I'm going to track my steps. I'm going to try at least move 10,000 steps per day. It's not easy to do. So you have to track that stuff. So I started that. And then the third one was, okay, now that I've got that down, how many calories am I actually putting in my body? What am I burning? Okay. So I realized that, I burn around 3,600 calories per day, depending on my physical activity. And I said, okay, well, how do you lose weight? Well, each pound is 3,000 calories. And so I said, all right, well, if I have a goal to get down to 240, I'm going to do this over 12 to 15 months. I need to just start habit stacking. And so I just did one thing at a time. Every 2 months, I added a new habit. Now it's just habits that are ingrained in me. And then the last habit that I added was sleep. I realized I was sleeping terrible. I was never recovering. I was only sleeping 6 hours a day. And I've added, up to 7.5, 8 hours worth of sleep for me. And my body recovers. I have more energy and I just feel better. And so for me, those were the ways that I did that. And then just trying to, track this over time. I'm down 34 pounds since last May. Today I weighed in at 251 pounds and my goal is 240. And so I'm getting there. And then it's like, okay, well, what's your baseline and how do you stay there? It will be a different type of, program for myself, but I've done it before. It's just a lot harder to do when you're running a business and you have 2 kids than it was when it was just all about me. And I was being pretty selfish in a good way, when I lost 120 pounds. And so I would say that my my focus on my health is so important, not just physical health, but I realize you can control a lot more on your physical health than you can existential circumstances coming in for your mental health. Yes, there are things you can do. Meditation, you can go through emotional intelligence training, you can put yourself around better people. Those are all great things. But one thing that you can control is what you put into your mouth, how much physical activity you do, and then that then makes you feel better. So your mental health is better as well. So I just try to stack all these different habits on top of each other. And now I'm in a place where I feel pretty good. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. And, I hope to just continue the process.
And what right now, based on the habits that you just outlined, if you had to identify what a perfect day looks like from waking up to going to bed? I know things happen, right? And sometimes we miss some of these goals and deadlines that we set for ourselves throughout the day. But in a perfect day of Logan, you're waking up at what time? You're doing what? Boom, boom, boom. How does it look?
Yeah, waking up between 4 and 5 and getting a workout in, doing my prayer, my scripture reading, and my meditation. So I use apps, man. I use Headspace. I use the Hallow app, which is a Catholic meditation app that I also use for my scripture. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm getting my workout in. And so it's either, getting my steps in the morning. I made it really easy. So I created a home gym. So now I have a nice gym level, treadmill. I've got the rower and I've got all the weights just downstairs. And so, I have to wake up before the kids wake up, before my wife goes to her workout. I need to make sure that I'm done as well. So I'm getting that workout in and then having a great breakfast. The other thing I was doing when I was gaining all this weight was intermittent fasting. It worked for a lot of people. It didn't work for me because I have a massive appetite. So even if I wait till 12 to eat, I will still eat 3,000 calories at each meal. And now I'm at 6,000 calories, right? So for me, it's just making sure that I eat smaller meals throughout the day. So I'm eating breakfast, I'm eating lunch, I'm eating dinner, having a little snack, and then heading off to the workplace, man. So just knocking out the day with great energy. And then at 5 o'clock, going to pick my kids up because I take my kids and pick them up from school every single day. Daycare, I guess, every single day. And so then it's like, okay, now I got to turn work off. So how do I do that? Well, I got to put boundaries around my phone and I got to put boundaries around my computer and making sure that I'm present now as a husband and a father, not a businessman. And so, just trying to figure out how to do that in the best way possible as well. Enjoying my time with my wife after we put the kids down from 7 to 9 is really our time together. And then getting really good sleep. So making sure that I'm not watching a ton of TV before bed. I'm putting good things into my mind, and then I'm doing some unwinding. So just kind of for me, it's prayer and meditation again, right before bed, setting my expectations for the next day, getting some good sleep and waking up inspired.
Got it. So bedtime is, roughly speaking, you'd say between 9 and 10?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. There we go, guys. You got the framework there for the path to freedom. So
that's exactly right, man.
Shifting gears to FTW Investments, which, as you mentioned, you guys founded the company late 2019. So that was definitely a rocky start. I'm sure you guys persevered, and now it's very easy for me to say most people at least running in our circle, are very familiar with your brand, who you are. I remember you actually used to have, and maybe you still do, but you found a way to niche down and make it clear from a branding perspective where you stand. But you had like 2 or 3 different operations all running at the same time. And I think one thing that I've observed about your growth is that you've figured out, okay, I need to be known as this guy. Even if I've got these other companies running, I need to be known as this guy. So if I'm seeing that correctly, kind of walk us through how you restructured your branding.
Yeah, well, I'm a real estate broker as well. So I had, obviously my license at a brokerage shop. And so I had that brand going where I was still helping 1031 exchange buyers and doing that work. And then I had Live Free Investments, which is now just my holding company, but that was the company I was doing real estate transactions as an owner before FTW. And then FTW started. And, frankly, we had a really successful private equity guy, just sit down with us and talk about raising funds. And he's like, look, your guys' LinkedIn is all over the place. You've got Third Space Property Group, you've got Corey Capital, you've got Live Free Investments, you got Clemens Real Estate, you got all these things. It's very confusing for people. So you need to get concise on your branding and messaging. And so I just stopped doing anything in regards to Live Free Investments, completely pivoted all of my focus into FTW Investments. And then also, I don't pepper in as much kind of personal, growth stuff as I used to on my LinkedIn, mostly because people are looking at LinkedIn from a professional standpoint. I still every once in a while will get something in there. But from the journaling standpoint, all the books and stuff that I'm reading, I just repivoted that because now I've got, close to 18,000 followers on LinkedIn. And what do I want them to know about me whenever they're getting ready to reach out? I want them to be very clear on what I'm trying to accomplish and what I'm doing out there and not be confused. So a confused mind always says no. And so just trying to get clear on that, create the marketing. We brought in a marketing director as well that helped us with that, just so people know exactly where our focus is. We've raised a decent amount of money now. And so I think it's really important that our investors know that we are fiduciaries and we're focused on their capital and the projects that they've put that into. And so, if you see me out there doing stuff under Live Free or Clemens Real Estate or something else, it's like, well, where is Logan really spending his time? And so that was kind of a big shift for us about 12, 15 months ago, just to really kind of hone in on that. So on the messaging side, so we could just create some clarity for not only our investors, but, different vendors and people that wanted to reach out to us.
Yeah. And how big is your team now? I think you said you're at about 20 to 30 staff.
Yeah, we have about 22, 23 employees now. And, our core team members, about 14 at FTW. And then we have some employees on the management side as well, because we are vertically integrated and managing some multifamily assets here in Kansas City.
Cool. So one thing that I think happens with a lot of CEOs or those in, would that be the right term for you, by the way, CEO?
So we have three principals.
Okay.
Parker is our CEO. I'm our CDO or Chief Development Officer, and then Corey is our Chief Investment Officer. But at the end of the day, all three of us are running this company. We just, if we needed titles, we had to put something on there.
Yeah, I feel you on that. So as Chief Development Officer, you go quickly from when it was just you, Corey, and Parker.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you, Corey, and Parker. It probably looked a lot different than it does now. And it goes from doing the thing to then eventually managing a team that does the thing. The bigger the company grows, you go from, you're still probably doing a good amount of what you did when you guys first started, but in order to scale, being able to manage and communicate with people becomes the master skill, right? And I think you mentioned you've been putting a lot of emphasis on growing your experience on that side of things, team management. And as the Chief Development Officer, I'm sure that really plays into it right there. So what are some of the secrets that you've seen to scaling from when you guys first started to now with the team?
So I think about things in mental models. It helps just to put frameworks around things for me. And so in a business, right, you have your personal operations. That's your own knowledge management, priority management, and task management. Okay. That's really where I started, right? Then you have sales and marketing, right? You got to have traffic, conversion, economics. Then you have your business operations. So you have to outsource, you have documents, you have standard operating procedures, you have to automate and optimize. Then you have hiring and managing. So you've got your management, culture, and hiring, and all of those things create your total output. And so basically the way that we kind of looked at this was, okay, the three principles, where do you fall into? Well, for me, it's really on the personal operations and sales and marketing. And then for Parker and Corey, it's really on the business operations, right? So we tried to create kind of an accountability chart to say, okay, out of those different functions, who is running what? And then we built teams around those individuals with leaders respective to those different verticals. And so, I think that what was really important was, when we first started, we didn't have any of these standard operating procedures. It was just all up in the principals' brains, and we could fix something really quickly. But when you have 13, 14 core team members starting to work on those, nothing was really documented. So we had to really start from scratch and say, okay, what are the things that we need to actually document? So that's standard operating procedures around each different function of the business. And then how do we make those the best? How do we optimize those for those? And then who's doing which ones? And then how do you figure out the accountability around each one of those functions? And so I would say that when we first started hiring, each one was kind of in its own little silo. And our biggest goal recently has been bringing those all together, because they all do work together, right? Due diligence talks to asset management, which talks to investor relations and marketing, which talks to finance and accounting. And so all those things need to be brought in together. So we really went down the rabbit hole of starting with the EOS system, or the entrepreneur's operating system, from the book, Gino Wickman's book, Traction, and have tried to implement that within the company. And so really understanding, okay, well, what are our rocks? What's our vision? How are we going to get there? What are we tracking on a regular basis? And then what meetings are we having on a regular basis to make sure that these different verticals are talking together? So, like I mentioned in the green room, it's going from kind of solopreneur and producer to business owner and leader. And so then you have different levels of delegation. The other tip that I would add to people who are looking to scale a business is there's 3 levels of delegation. You have directive, objective, and leadership. And you want to get to leadership with as many people as you possibly can, but you can't just start there. You have to be directive, meaning, hey, I want lunch and I want it from this restaurant and I want this menu item at this time. And then it's objective. Hey, I just want lunch from this restaurant. And then it's leadership. It's like, hey, I just want lunch. Right. So that's kind of how you break those down. Right. So I think that the goal is to try to get as many of our employees to that leadership component that you can. But if you just try to start there, you're not going to give people what they need to be successful. So we've been building all the standard operating procedures inside of that, alongside the accountability chart, and then understanding where each employee is along the spectrum of that delegation realm, and figuring out how to best manage and lead those individuals. And that's how, when you always hear, get people in the right seats, headed in the right direction, all that stuff, that's the actual practical way that you do that. And that's just, a daily process that you have to continue to refine and optimize.
Yeah. And an interesting thing about that, and I think a lot of business owners, small business owners as well, don't realize this. Sometimes we think that we don't have a system in place for something, but actually every single business has a system in place that will get them the results that they're getting right now.
That's
and so if you think you don't have one, you actually do. And I can't help but endorse that book that Logan just referenced, because I know that's what we use at ASIM Capital. And I've just seen many companies grow successful from following that framework that Gino Wickman put together in Traction. And I haven't got a chance to completely dive into rocket fuel yet, but I know that's the sequel to it. Did you guys get into that one yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Just taking it baby step by baby step,
So check that out, guys. Traction by Gino Wickman, great book. Another thing that I really wanted to zone in on here, Logan, because as you mentioned, you've gone through these periods where, it's all about just massive output, journaling, etc. And then now you're reaching a phase in life where it's like, man, how can I just simplify everything?
Yeah.
Which I love. I love the principle of simplifying things. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on in your world right now in regards to simplifying your daily life.
Yeah, well, I went through that whole process of reading about 750 books, and I will tell you that there's just the same message, just packaged up in a different way. And so find a few that really resonate with you. And if you continue just to read just because it feels good and you think that knowledge is kind of power, knowledge is potential power, knowledge plus action is power. So what you want to get to is have the knowledge, but you got to get to that action piece too. And that's actually what creates power. So for me, as reading all those books, I started to see common themes. Okay. And so I just put pillars together in my life. And this is from a mentor of mine early on. Said, what are the most, if you're sitting on a stool, how many legs does it typically have? Well, it's usually 4, right? Especially for us big guys. There might be 3, but it's typically 4. So what's the most 4 things that are most important in your life? And I'm going to give you the first 3. It's your faith, your family, and your fitness. And then the last one you can choose either well, that be fun or food or future. And I picked future because I'm very career driven and very focused on building a business. And so, for me, I said, okay, what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators that I can put in my own life around those 4 things? And I don't have more than 2 or 3 for each one. So for my faith, it's reading, it's meditation, it's prayer, it's going to mass on Wednesdays, and then for my family, it's being present, being patient, not raising my voice. giving them the time that they need, really talking and listening. And then for my fitness, I've already talked about that. So all the KPIs I have around my fitness. And then my future is kind of this big bucket that we just kind of went through on growing a business. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. But I picked the business that I'm going to be in for the next 20, 30 years, whatever the time frame is. And so now it's just getting better and being able to be fluid in that business. So for me, I don't need the next kind of like fancy tool or even motivation. Motivation is fickle. I think you have to have inspiration, and you got to figure out how you can be inspired every single day. And inspiration is lasting. Motivation is, hey, I'm going to listen to a song that's going to get me hyped up. That's all great. I do that. Trust me. My wife laughs at me when she sees me in the driveway, jumping up and down, hyped up because I just did 100 kettlebells, like I still do that stuff. But you can't rely on extrinsic things to say, okay, I'm going to get you motivated to do something. Maybe you need that early on. And so I went through this shift of, okay, I've got all the knowledge now, or I know the knowledge, but I need to pick what's going to actually get me to action so I can actually be a powerful individual. And so I think that was kind of the shift that I've been going through is like, okay, out of all those things, I've got the family, I've got my faith, I've got my business, I got my future, I've got the fitness. I need to make sure that I can just framework this stuff into being simple, because like we mentioned earlier, a confused mind says no. And I think a lot of people get the, paralysis by analysis. And so just keeping it simple. And so what I do now is I read books about gentlemen and ladies who have been very successful, and hearing their stories and what they did and how and there's themes in that as well. It's grit. It's perseverance. It's accountability. It's being able to pick yourself up off the ground and get back up. And it's being able to be intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated. And I think those are really important things. So instead of just journaling all my habits on a regular basis now, I just look at the results. And I say, okay, I know what I'm trying to accomplish. What are the results that I got? And then I'm just have to be really honest with myself and accountable. This only works if you're extremely accountable with yourself, though. You have to have the mirror test, right? So like these clothes right here fit a lot tighter, 6 months ago than they do now. So there's things that I know that I have to hold myself accountable. If you're not somebody that can hold yourself accountable, then you need a coach. You need a group, you need a mastermind, you need somebody that can help you do that. But I'm in the process now of self-accountability. And, two of my top talents are discipline and focus. So it comes naturally to me. But I just had to direct all those things and then create a mental model that I could just track very quickly and easily, because now I'm taking in a lot more information than I was previously. I have all the personal and professional growth stuff. That's fantastic. But now I got to understand macroeconomics and interest rates and all these different things that Hunter talks about on his podcast all the time. And I have to disseminate that information into a way to actually go create a thesis and then go execute that. So for me, it was, okay, now that the business is growing, I actually need less information in regards to my personal side. I need more information on the professional and macroeconomic side so I can actually make good decisions in the business. So that's why I had to simplify that, because I've added a whole nother bucket of information now that my mind needs to be focused on, because that's what our investors actually invest in, is thesis, is data, is the way that you create that, and then actually go find opportunities that fit those different criteria. So just shifting kind of the energy into different areas, not necessarily saying no to new information, but the new information that I'm taking in is much more at a higher level, and that will impact our business because I've already laid that foundation the last 7 or 8 years on the personal side. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And
okay.
Two things about your journey that I want to squeeze in here, maybe even three now I think about it, because I want to talk about, we are going to talk about FTW, what you guys got going on right now, where people can go to invest, etc. But the other two things coming to mind are, one, I have noticed you've made a conscious effort to get more focused on not only your intake of economic data, but your output to be viewed as a reliable leader in the space that actually knows what you're talking
100%.
about. And I think it seems like you had an epiphany on, wow, if I can be known as someone who actually knows what they're talking about with economics, then we can take this thing even further. So let's just leave it at that, and then I got one more for you after that. So just elaborate on that one for us.
Well, I just modeled Hunter. That's all it was. Just like you guys did the dream client for me on Race Masters, I just did the dream client on capital raising. Who do I want to raise? Who do I want to be like in the capital raising space? Well, I want to be like Hunter after, being able to take on Richard Duncan on his podcast and being confident, being able to do that. Right. So, for me, it was, well, if I'm going to raise capital, all the questions I get are, okay, well, talk to me about why why are you investing in retail shopping centers when, the Amazon effect is going on? Well, I could talk to you about that for 45 minutes. And I think at the end of that, you would at least say, oh, wow, I needed to dive in deeper than just the headline. So for me, it was, using those as tools when I'm talking to investors, especially contrarian views, because if you just have this headline view of something and you just tell somebody, it's just going to die right there, because they're going to be able to pull all of the mainstream media out and rebut your argument, so to speak. But if you have done the work, you understand the underlying fundamentals, and you actually have data and you have results that have spoken for themselves, and you can package those in a clear narrative in a way. I think it's what is the talk track narrative? It's the sizzle stack. Oh my gosh, I do sizzle stacks for every single deal. I think the name is a little goofy. You probably should rename that, because I brought that to my partners, said, hey, we're going to start doing sizzle stacks for each one of our deals. I just call it a deal narrative now, but it includes, downside, upside, unseen benefits, and so it's really, really simple. So I've created these talk tracks for each one, but I've got data that backs them up. And then people are like, okay, well, what if you go, what if the Fed does this? And then if I didn't take economics in grades or in college or in high school or anything like that. So I had to read macro and microeconomics textbooks. I did. Gregory Mankiw is my professor, in my office at my house, because I sat down and I read those textbooks to understand supply and demand and all the different things. And then I started diving into the Federal Reserve and understanding how it was formed. What levers do they actually have to pull? What is their dual mandate? All these different things. And so people actually text me now saying, hey, I just saw this Twitter thread from Bill Ackman. I was texting with two of my investors last night, and they're like, what does this actually mean? Is this text thread of 7 or 8 texts. And they're like, can somebody explain this to me, as a child? And I could, and that was really powerful. And those guys, are investing with me on a regular basis. So I think it was just for me, it was what arrows in my quiver do I need to be able to make people feel confident? On the business side of things, just like the personal operations and sales and marketing, I could talk that stuff all day. But when we got into the economic side of things and actually investment thesis, that's where I really needed to beef up my wherewithal. And that's what I've been focused on.
Yeah. And so I think that's some low hanging fruit for any capital raisers out there, or those who are really in the world of commercial real estate investments. Being able to have that level of expertise when it comes to economics will set you apart, because there's not a whole lot of people, from my opinion, focusing on that. They're more focusing on talking about the deal and aspects
Markets.
like that, right? Markets. So well, that's a little hack for you. And then you mentioned it, and this is the last one I wanted to squeeze in here, Logan, is talking about retail. And we have the retail apocalypse going on, and being able to build a relationship with guys like Michael Flight. I've been a firm believer in retail since I got into this business. But and actually, since I said we just moved here to Calgary, my wife and I were at IKEA just a few days ago, and I'm like, there is maybe there's going to be an evolution of retail, but just based on that shopping experience alone at IKEA, you go, wow, there's no way that this is going anywhere anytime soon. So what are some of the FAQs that you get, and how do you rebuttal to them with the retail?
Yeah, I will just say this. Everyone thinks that the Amazon effect is going to take over the world. And so let's just get into the data. E-commerce sales grew by 14.2% from 2020 to 2021, but it still only represents 19% of total retail sales. So that's the web penetration. And that figure is quite a bit less than because the total retail sales aren't taking in restaurants, bars, auto dealers, or gas stations. And so total retail sales still grew 14% as well. And so web penetration is only 19.2%. So what I try to tell people is there's different types of retail, right? I mean, there's different reasons that retail exists. And the way that we think about investing in retail is service-based, e-commerce resistant businesses. So you think about, your physical therapy stores, or your financial services or religious services, discount stores, gyms, fitness centers, medical care, animal health, restaurants, salon and beauty. Those are the centers that I am focused on. It's a very niche of retail, which is neighborhood retail shopping centers that are about a mile away from people's homes. And so, yes, maybe there will be a big shift in the power centers and the malls and all these different things. We've seen some of that happen already, but it's the shopping center that you're driving by on the way home with the kids and you need some milk and you got to jump in and you got to grab it and jump back out into the car, right? Or whatever it is. So I think that, there's just different things you have to understand when it comes to retail. And, real estate is hyper local and each asset class is extremely different. In office, for example, I'm looking at high-rise offices right outside my office here is a lot different than the suburban office that we're going under contract in Johnson County, 25 minutes away. So understanding the different underlying fundamentals of each asset class and then the niches inside of those asset classes, that's where the value is created as sponsors and as operators. You have to be able to delineate the CoStar reports from, actual investment thesis and figure out where the niche is that nobody's looking into because they're just staying with the mainstream media and the headlines. And so I think that's what we're focused on. I was bullish on these things back in 2019, pre-COVID. We had 35 million of these under contract. And obviously, with a pandemic happening and not knowing what was going to happen, we did drop all of those. But now I've got 26 months of how those shops performed and how those retail shopping centers actually did during COVID. I don't think we're going to see another lockdown like we did. And what happened was the weak businesses were weeded out and they were either replaced by new businesses or other stronger businesses expanded. And so now you actually have a stronger footprint in a lot of these retail shopping centers because maybe the fly-by-night, meal packing services or whatever it was, went away because they just needed a retail location and they figured out, hey, I actually don't need a retail location. So I think that you're seeing stronger unit mixes or tenant mixes in these shopping centers when done correctly, and location is key for these shopping centers as well.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, hey, Logan, thank you so much for hanging out with us here today and investing your most valuable resource with us, your time. I do have one more fun question for you here.
Yeah.
Who has the best hair in commercial real estate retail, you or CEO of LibertyFund.io, Michael Flight?
I would have to say I just had Michael on my podcast and his hair just blows mine out of the water. So Michael Flight 100% of the time. I love that guy and his hair. If my hair looks like that at that age, I will be rocking and rolling. So man, that guy's crushing it.
We were going to get this over to him. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? I did say this too. What do you guys got going on right now at FTW and how can our listeners go and learn more and if they want to invest with you?
Still extremely bullish on multifamily. I'm finding needle in the haystack opportunities. We're highly focused in the Midwest. So Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Arkansas, Oklahoma. That's where we're going to stay. It's our bread and butter. We can operate in the space. But anything in regards to affordable housing, I am still extremely bullish on. It's just deal velocity. You have to do so much more underwriting, so much more reach out to find the one. But when you do, it's fantastic. So doing some mobile home communities in the Midwest, doing affordable housing, but also shifting into retail shopping centers and, contrarian views, but suburban office in Kansas City as well. So anybody wants to reach out to us, you can find me on LinkedIn. I post daily about what we've got going on and what we're doing. That's Mr. Kansas City, Logan Freeman on LinkedIn. I think you'll find a lot of my posts valuable. We get a lot of good feedback from that stuff. And then FTW Investments, LLC.com if you want to learn more. I write a weekly blog. It's got really high regard. People love it. It's definitely not your normal weekly blog. I'm gonna challenge you and spend a lot of time on those articles, and we've gotten great feedback on that as well.
Nice. So there you go, guys. FTW Investments, LLC.com. Correct. All right. And is that the best way if they want to reach out to you and get in touch with you? I think you did mention LinkedIn, but through the website, is that preferred?
Absolutely.
Okay. There you guys go. Again, FTW Investments, LLC.com. This is Logan Freeman, the CDO, also co-founder of the firm. Logan, thank you again for hanging out with us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on again, Adam. It was a blast.
Yeah. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for investing your most valuable resource with us as well, your time. And remember, in all you think, say, and do, take it to the next level.